President Biden made history on August 16, 2022, by signing the Inflation Reduction Act into law. This act marked the most significant commitment to clean energy and climate action. Once upon a time, there was a transformative law called the Inflation Reduction Act. This law was designed to help the United States meet its climate goals and strengthen energy security. It aimed to invest in America, to create good-paying jobs, reduce energy and healthcare costs for families, and make the tax code fairer. Within a mere year of the law being signed, American workers and families already profoundly feel its effects. It is making a difference for underserved communities and those frequently overlooked. According to external sources, the Inflation Reduction Act has already generated over 170,000 clean energy jobs. Companies have disclosed investments exceeding $110 billion in clean energy manufacturing within the past year. The legislation is allocating significant funds to shield communities from the effects of climate change. Additionally, numerous seniors benefit from cost savings as their monthly insulin expenses are limited to $35. The private sector announced over $110 billion in new investments for clean energy manufacturing. This includes over $70 billion for the electric vehicle supply chain and more than $10 billion for solar manufacturing. Since the president took office, the private sector has revealed around $240 billion in fresh investments for clean energy manufacturing. Since the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law, investments in clean energy and climate have created over 170,000 jobs. Estimates by external organizations suggest that the law is expected to generate more than 1.5 million additional jobs in the next decade. Due to the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, public and private sector investments are projected to cut greenhouse gas emissions by around 1 billion tons in 2030. The administration has granted over $1 billion to communities to enhance their resilience and shield them from devastating effects of climate change, such as drought, heat, and extreme weather. According to new data released today by the Department of Energy, American families are expected to save $27 to $38 billion on their electricity bills from 2022 to 2030, compared to a scenario without the Inflation Reduction Act. The country has achieved a record low uninsured rate, with nearly 15 million individuals benefiting from an average annual savings of $800 on health insurance premiums. Additionally, numerous Medicare seniors are experiencing reduced out-of-pocket expenses for prescription medications, with insulin costs now limited to $35 per month. The IRS is cracking down on wealthy tax cheats and boosting collections from delinquent millionaires. At the same time, they are enhancing customer service for law-abiding taxpayers by reducing phone wait times from 28 minutes to just 3 minutes this year. This act is truly a groundbreaking investment in addressing the climate crisis on a global scale. With the combined efforts of federal, state, and local governments and the private sector, the United States is making strides towards meeting President Biden's challenging targets. The goal is to reduce emissions by 50 to 52% from 2005 levels by 2030 and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. According to external researchers, U.S. greenhouse gas emissions are expected to decrease by 43 to 48% below 2005 levels by 2035 due to existing laws. With the Inflation Reduction Act, progress is being made to help America achieve its climate goals, develop a clean energy economy, and enhance energy security. According to the Department of Energy, the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law are projected to decrease greenhouse gas emissions by around 1 billion tons by 2030. The Department of Energy discovered that the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law were working together to bring about a wave of new clean electricity generation. This development could lead to the United States to achieve 80% clean electricity by 2030. According to estimates from the Department of Energy, electricity generation from wind in the U.S. is projected to triple, while solar generation is expected to increase 7 to 8 times by 2030. In the upcoming 7 years, the projection indicates a significant increase in wind, solar, and battery deployment, all thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. Since President Biden assumed office, electric vehicle sales have tripled, driven by investments in the Inflation Reduction Act to enhance clean energy manufacturing and reduce electric vehicle expenses for American households. Federal agencies have incorporated equity and environmental justice into their grant programs to guarantee that low-income and disadvantaged communities will reap the Inflation Reduction Act's benefits, which aligns with the President's Justice 40 initiative. The Environmental Protection Agency has allocated $650 million for environmental justice projects. This funding aims to decrease pollution and empower community-based organizations and local governments to carry out projects in their neighborhoods. Approximately two-thirds of the $27 billion Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund from the EPA is set to be directed toward low-income and disadvantaged communities. Philanthropic organizations, impact investing organizations, and intermediaries have dedicated over $1.6 billion to supporting the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy and climate provisions. This commitment guarantees better access to essential technical support for underserved communities, enabling them to fully leverage the law's advantages. The Inflation Reduction Act will help shape America's clean energy future and enhance the resilience of communities nationwide, shielding them from the severe effects of the climate crisis. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration granted $562 million for nearly 150 projects in 30 coastal states and territories. This funding, a collaboration between the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law, aims to enhance the resilience of communities and local economies to climate change. An exciting initiative by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration involves a $575 million competition called the Climate Resilience Regional Challenge. This competition aims to assist projects that enhance the resilience of coastal and Great Lakes communities to extreme weather and other effects of climate change. The Bureau of Reclamation from the Department of the Interior has revealed a whopping $540 million plan to tackle the ongoing drought in the Colorado River Basin. The U.S. Forest Service has allocated $250 million to states and territories to ensure that urban communities have fair access to trees and their associated benefits, such as protection from extreme heat. Soon, the USFS is set to grant up to $1 billion to enhance access to trees and green spaces in urban and community forests, areas where over 84% of Americans reside, work, and enjoy. In a move to address inflation, the Inflation Reduction Act aims to generate $300 billion in revenue over the next 10 years. This will be achieved by mandating that big corporations contribute a minimum of 15% in taxes on their earnings and by introducing a 1% excise tax on stock buybacks and redemptions. Initial guidance on these tax provisions has already been issued by the Treasury and the IRS as they come into effect this year. The Department of the Interior revealed a new restoration and resilience framework. This framework will help guide $2 billion in investments from the President's Investing in America agenda to restore and protect our nation's lands and waters. Embarking on this endeavor, the Bureau of Land Management has dedicated an initial $161 million through the Inflation Reduction Act to rejuvenate ecosystems and boost local economies. The National Park Service has allocated $44 million from the Inflation Reduction Act to national parks in 39 states, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service granted over $120 million to enhance the National Wildlife Refuge System's climate resilience through rebuilding and restoration. There once was an act called the Inflation Reduction Act with a noble goal: to enhance domestic manufacturing, generate well-compensated union jobs, and fortify supply chains to be more resilient, secure, and trustworthy. Since President Biden and Vice President Harris took office, the law, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS and Science Act have significantly driven over $500 billion in private sector manufacturing investments. This includes around $240 billion allocated explicitly to clean energy manufacturing investments. Investment is being directed towards typically overlooked areas, thanks to tax credits for constructing clean energy projects in traditional energy communities and low-income areas. This initiative also generates well-paying jobs by encouraging the use of local materials, fair wages, and the employment of registered apprentices to contribute to the country's clean energy development. In the coming years, these investments are expected to help the IRS recover a minimum of $150 billion in taxes owed by affluent individuals and large companies. In the future, the IRS plans to introduce several enhancements to customer service. These include a direct file pilot program for electronic filing, expanded in-person services in rural and underserved areas, a refund processing initiative to speed up refunds, and the introduction of new online account tools and mobile-friendly tax forms.